The sun hung low over Willow Creek Estates, casting golden streaks across manicured lawns and white picket fences. From the outside, it looked like a peaceful slice of suburbia, safe, quiet, orderly. But beneath that polished surface brewed a rot no one wanted to name. A rot with a clipboard, a power complex, and a taste for control. My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 47, retired from the fire department after 22 years of service. I live alone in a modest one-story home at the end of Sycamore Lane. What sets me apart from the others on this prim little street isn't my background or the rust-colored pickup in my driveway. It's the gray oxygen hose coiled around my shoulders like a second set of lungs. 10 years ago, a roof collapsed on me during a blaze. The smoke, the chemicals, the fire, it damaged my lungs beyond repair. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, stage 3. It means my breathing is rationed, calculated, and forever tethered to machines that hum day and night just to keep me conscious. And that machine, the one that sits discreetly beside my home, drawing power from a weatherproof line outside the wall, is what made me a target. She came storming into my life the way all tyrants do, smiling, decisive, and completely indifferent to the cost of her authority. Karen Brighton, the new HOA president. A former real estate agent who, by all appearances, had traded open houses for open warfare. The first letter arrived a week after she took over. Dear resident, you are in violation of HOA Code 12.7, unsightly equipment visible from the street. Please remove or relocate immediately to maintain neighborhood aesthetics. I called the number listed and explained. That equipment is my oxygen concentrator. It's life support. I can't move it inside. It needs ventilation. The woman on the other end, Karen herself, as it turned out, paused. Then, curtly, you'll need to find a solution that doesn't lower the community's curb appeal. Over the next month, the letters piled up. Complaints about the gentle humming sound the machine made. Notes taped to my door. A warning that further violations could result in fines. I submitted a doctor's note. Provided medical documentation. I even offered to construct a screened enclosure to hide the unit, out of my own pocket. But the board, under Karen's leadership, denied every proposal. It was as if no explanation would ever be good enough. Then came the day she arrived in person. It was a cloudless Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on my porch, oxygen tube in place, watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes down the street. That's when Karen strode up the walkway, like she owned the pavement beneath her feet. Blonde bob, perfectly ironed slacks, and a button blazer far too formal for the 85-degree weather. She clutched her clipboard like it was a badge. Mr. Foster, she began, without even a polite greeting. I'm here on behalf of the HOA to inform you that you are in your final week of noncompliance. That machine, she pointed at the concentrator, must be removed or relocated. If not, we will consider it a violation subject to community enforcement measures. I looked her dead in the eye. That machine keeps me alive. She offered a thin smile, the kind people give before saying something unforgivable. And we sympathize. But your personal needs can't override the standards everyone agreed to when they moved here. We have rules for a reason. Do your rules include killing people? She didn't answer, just pivoted on her heel and walked off. I wanted to believe that would be the end of it. I wanted to believe that some flicker of conscience would stop her. But power doesn't yield to reason. It feeds on submission. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. I started noticing small things. My trash bins knocked over, utility markings scratched out, the enclosure plan I'd submitted mysteriously vanishing from the HOA portal. At night, someone threw rocks at my siding. I reported it to the police, but with no proof and no witnesses, they could do little more than take a statement. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. Some avoided my house altogether. Karen was winning not just with paperwork, but with pressure. The kind that wears you down inch by inch. And I was tired. Always tired. Every breath felt like a debt I couldn't repay. Then one night it happened. I was watching television, reclined with my backup tank beside me while the main concentrator buzzed outside. It was late, after 8. The hum had become background noise I no longer noticed until it vanished. Suddenly, silence. Then a hiss as the emergency pressure dropped. No air. I stumbled to my feet, dizzy. My chest tightened. I grabbed the portable tank and slapped it on. Only 14% left. I made my way outside, every step a struggle. That's when I saw it. The access panel to the concentrator was ripped open. The power cord was unplugged, dangling.
Torn.
And there she was. Karen stood at the edge of my lawn, clipboard in hand, her face lit faintly by the porch light. No shame. No surprise. I told you, Mr. Foster, she said, almost casually. This doesn't belong here. You unplugged my oxygen? I gasped. You could have killed me. Her lips curled. Don't be so dramatic. You're still standing, aren't you? I reached for my phone with shaking hands and called 911. The ambulance arrived fast. I barely remember the oxygen mask being pressed to my face, the flashing red lights, the shouts. But I remember her, Karen, standing there, arms folded, not a flicker of remorse in her eyes. The police came too. I told them everything. The threats, the harassment, the disconnection. But she denied it all. Said she was walking her dog and noticed something strange at my unit. Claimed she approached to investigate, not realizing I was in distress. They couldn't arrest her. Not without video evidence. Not without a witness. But that night, as I lay in the hospital bed recovering, something shifted inside me. She didn't just cross a line. She tried to end me. And now I wasn't going to play nice anymore. 3 days after the hospital discharged me, I returned home to find a certified envelope taped to my door. It was an HOA violation notice, citing unauthorized tampering with community property and aggressive behavior toward HOA board members. At the bottom, in tight, sharp strokes, was Karen Brighton's signature. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so cruel. I'd spent 2 nights in a hospital bed hooked up to oxygen around the clock. My chest still ached, but the fire inside me burned hotter than ever. Karen had escalated from passive-aggressive letters to life-threatening sabotage, and now she was flipping the narrative, framing me as the aggressor. It was time I fought back on her terms, strategically and with evidence. The next morning, I made a call to an old friend, Marcus Hale, a retired police investigator who now did freelance work as a private eye. We hadn't spoken in years, but once I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. "Someone tampered with your life support?" he said, voice tight with disbelief. "That's attempted murder, Dan. Or, at the very least, criminal negligence. You got any cameras?" "No," I admitted. "I didn't think I needed them." "You do now. I'll come by tomorrow. We'll wire the place up like Fort Knox." By noon the following day, Marcus had installed 3 discrete security cameras, one above the front porch, one angled toward the oxygen unit, and another covering the driveway. All motion-activated, high-resolution, cloud-synced. "Let's see if she tries anything again," he said grimly. "People like her don't stop unless someone makes them." Karen, of course, wasted no time in noticing the change. That evening, she marched down the sidewalk with her ever-present clipboard, casting glances at my porch camera. She didn't confront me directly, but her message came in the form of a fresh HOA notice stuck to my mailbox. "Unauthorized external security devices may violate community privacy guidelines." I didn't respond. Let her squirm. Instead, I began documenting every interaction, every letter, every smirk she sent from across the street. Karen may have controlled the board, but she didn't control the law. And sooner or later, she would slip. Sure enough, it happened within the week. It was late Saturday afternoon when the motion alert pinged my phone. I tapped the notification and watched in real time as Karen approached my property alone. She wore dark sunglasses and latex gloves, suspicious enough, but what she did next made my blood run cold. She walked straight to the concentrator unit,
Bent down.
pulled something from her purse. A pair of wire cutters. I couldn't breathe, not from my illness, but from the sheer disbelief. On camera, in broad daylight, she clipped the external line. Sparks flew. The machine died. And then she walked away. I called Marcus immediately. He watched the footage in silence, then let out a slow breath. She'd just signed her own arrest warrant. The police arrived within the hour. I showed them the footage, along with hospital records, prior complaints, and the latest violation notices. The officers were professional, but even they looked stunned. One leaned toward the monitor and muttered, "She really thought no one would see this?" They didn't arrest her immediately. They wanted to follow procedure. But within 48 hours, Karen Brighton was charged with endangerment of life, criminal negligence, and tampering with medical equipment. When the squad car pulled up outside her home, half the neighborhood peeked through curtains. She was escorted out in handcuffs, still arguing with the officers, still shouting about community standards and property values. I watched from my porch, oxygen tube in place. I didn't say a word. Later that night, Marcus and I sat in my living room reviewing the footage one more time, making sure nothing had been missed. "You know," he said, shaking his head, "some people don't understand power is a privilege, not a weapon." I nodded slowly. She thought I was weak because I couldn't breathe without help. But she didn't realize people like us don't go down without fighting. He raised a glass of ginger ale. "To justice." We clinked. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Karen's arrest was only the beginning. There were other board members who stood by her, who let her abuse go unchecked. People who shrugged while she bullied the vulnerable and called it community management. I wasn't just going to recover. I was going to rebuild, and this time, make sure no one else was left gasping in the dark. Karen Brighton's arrest hit Willow Creek Estates like a thunderclap. For the first time, the pristine illusion of suburbia cracked wide open, and beneath it lay the uncomfortable truth. The HOA wasn't just overreaching, it was rotting. In the days following her arrest, I noticed subtle shifts. For starters, the daily foot traffic by my house slowed to a trickle. Gone were the thinly veiled glares, the muttered judgments. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid passing my porch now kept their heads down, pretending they hadn't participated in months of silent complicity. But what struck me more were the few who dared to knock on my door. One was Helen McKinney, a quiet widow from 2 blocks over. She stood on my doorstep clutching a manila envelope to her chest like it might bite. "I heard about what happened," she said softly, eyes darting around like she feared being seen. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Inside the envelope were printed emails, exchanges between Karen and the other board members. Some were filled with snide jokes about problem residents and how to strategically encourage compliance through intimidation. My name appeared in more than one, highlighted in red. One message read, "He's alone.
Weak.
Shouldn't be hard to make him fold." Helen leaned in close. "I was the secretary for the board until last month. I didn't like where things were heading. They wanted me to forge meeting minutes. Karen said it would help us streamline enforcement. That's when I walked." I thanked her with a tight hug, though my breath faltered. The image of Karen with wire cutters had been damning, but this was systemic. I called Marcus that evening. He arrived within the hour. "Whistleblower testimony and internal documents," he said, flipping through the emails with practiced eyes. "This isn't just negligence anymore. It's a pattern. Harassment.
Fraud.
Civil liability." I nodded, weary but determined. I wanted exposed. All of it. Not just Karen. He gave a slow, approving smile. "Then we do it the right way. With facts, with receipts, and with a spotlight big enough to make sure they can't wriggle away." Over the next week, we gathered everything. Marcus filed a formal report with the local DA's office, backed by the footage, the hospital records, Helen's emails, and even old archived HOA meeting minutes that showed discrepancies between what was said and what was filed. The local news caught wind soon after. A small outlet first, then a regional station. They reached out for a comment, and after some hesitation, I agreed to speak on record. The day the story aired, I sat stiffly in front of a camera, oxygen tube in place, as a reporter asked, "What would you say to others being targeted by unchecked HOAs?" I looked straight into the lens. Don't stay quiet. People like Karen thrive on silence. But when one voice rises, others will too. That segment went viral. Not because of my words, but because people recognized the story. Different faces, same abuse. The next morning, my inbox flooded. Messages from residents across the state, some even across the country, shared tales of HOAs abusing their power, elderly couples fined for ramp installations, veterans harassed for flag displays, single mothers threatened over children's toys left in yards. But one message hit harder than the rest. It was from a woman named Marisol. She lived 3 streets down and had never spoken to me before. "I lost my husband last year. He was on oxygen too. Karen fined us $500 for a noise violation because of his compressor. We had to choose between groceries and paying the fine. He died 5 months later. I always wondered if the stress made it worse." I stared at the message for a long time, my lungs working harder than usual. Karen wasn't just a tyrant. She was a predator, and Willow Creek had been her hunting ground. A week later, the DA's office filed additional charges, not just against Karen, but against 2 other HOA board members. Fraud, misuse of funds, and conspiracy to intimidate residents. Helen's testimony proved invaluable. But she wasn't the only one who came forward. A former HOA treasurer admitted to being ordered to alter financial records. Another resident produced letters they'd received threatening home seizures for trivial infractions. The board crumbled overnight. But I wasn't done. At the next emergency HOA meeting, open to all residents, I took the floor. Oxygen hose in place, voice steady, I faced the crowd that had once let Karen torment me unchecked. "I don't want revenge," I began. "I want reform." The room went silent. We need transparency. We need accountability. And most of all, we need to remember that neighborhoods are made of people, not power plays. A smattering of applause began, hesitant but growing. For the first time, I saw something different in their faces. Not pity, not fear.
Respect.
By the end of the month, a new interim HOA board was appointed. This time, it included Helen and me. The first act we passed? A community charter update. No policy shall infringe upon the medical needs, personal dignity, or life-saving equipment of any resident. Ever. But as much as things had improved, I knew Section 4 of the story was still unwritten. Justice had been served. The power structure had cracked. But what would rise from the ruins? That was a choice we'd have to make, together. 6 months later, the air in Willow Creek Estates had shifted, not just metaphorically, but tangibly. You could feel it in the slower pace of neighbors strolling past each other's homes. You could hear it in the quiet kindness exchanged at mailboxes and front porches. Gone was the chill of surveillance masquerading as order. In its place, a cautious, hard-won peace. Karen Brighton had been found guilty on multiple charges, including criminal negligence and endangerment. The court had delivered a 2-year sentence, with an additional civil penalty that would help fund a community wellness initiative. Her downfall was now the cautionary tale whispered in neighborhoods far beyond our own. But this story was never just about one woman. It was about a system allowed to fester, until someone breathless but not broken stood up. And now, the real work had begun. I sat on the porch, the same porch where Karen once scowled from across the street. A new neighbor waved to me. Tara and her 3 kids had just moved in last month. There was sidewalk chalk on their driveway, potted plants on their stoop, and laughter echoing from their backyard. It hadn't always been like that. Under Karen's reign, that kind of joy was seen as clutter or noise. Now it was proof we were healing. Marcus walked up, hands in his pockets, sunglasses tucked into the collar of his shirt. "You look more alive every time I see you," he grinned. "Breathing helps," I said dryly, tapping the small portable concentrator clipped to my belt. "Also, peace and quiet." He chuckled, then handed me a manila envelope. "Last of the settlement paperwork. It's official. You're free and clear. No more HOA fees for the next 5 years, as ordered." "Feels strange," I admitted, leafing through the documents. Like I should be angry still. But I'm not. "Because you fought," Marcus said. "You won. And now this place looks more like a community than it ever did before." That evening, the neighborhood gathered for something new, a community potluck. No board approval needed. No measuring how far a chair was from the curb or whether someone's lawn was a quarter inch too long.
Just people.
Just food. Just life. Helen approached me with a plate in one hand and a sparkle in her eye. Did you hear? We voted to make the board fully transparent. Open minutes, quarterly public Q&As, and a resident watchdog committee. I did, I said. And I think it's brilliant. She smiled. You're the reason it's possible. You gave us courage. No, I replied, nodding toward the tables full of laughing, mingling neighbors. We gave each other courage. A child ran past us, waving a makeshift superhero cape, made from a dish towel. His mother called out gently, laughing instead of scolding. I couldn't help but smile. This right here was the justice that mattered most. Not the courtroom verdict, not even Karen's jail time. It was the restoration of humanity, the reclaiming of space where dignity could breathe again. Before the night ended, someone handed me a microphone. I hadn't expected to speak, but as I looked out at the faces in the crowd, young, old, cautious, hopeful, I realized something else needed saying. When I moved here, I began. I thought I was buying into safety. A clean, quiet place to heal. I never imagined I'd be treated like a nuisance because of a medical condition I didn't choose. There were nods in the audience, even a few teary eyes. But what Karen did wasn't just a personal vendetta.
It was a warning sign.
She wielded power because we let her. Because we were too tired, too scared, or too polite to push back. And I get it. I do. But here's what I've learned. I paused, letting the weight of silence settle. One voice can disrupt a system. But many voices? Together? They can rebuild one. The crowd erupted into applause, not thunderous, but warm.
Real.
That night, as I returned home under the soft glow of porch lights and string lanterns, I thought about how far we'd come. Not just from the oxygen line incident, but from the culture of fear that had held us captive. And I knew, deep in my bones, that we wouldn't go back. Months turned into a year. Tara joined the new HOA board. Marcus started a nonprofit to help others stand up against housing injustice. And I began writing not just about what happened, but about how communities could protect their most vulnerable without sacrificing order. The story of Willow Creek spread. It became a symbol of accountability, yes, but also of something greater. Of how a man gasping for breath found the strength to speak. Of how a neighborhood, once silent, found its voice. And of how justice isn't just a courtroom verdict, it's the quiet, everyday act of choosing kindness over control.